people talk about the war on crime, and they talked about the war on drugs, which was, I guess, the first to be internationalized. Then there's the war on terror. It's, in every case, a war of an enemy that you're not going to beat, right? It's a permanent war. It's a war as a state of being, and in a way, the state is that war. The state is the battle of sovereign power against some enemy, which is both completely dishonorable, but also completely unbeatable, because it's a constituent element in our nature, is the idea. If you look at the word police, it's derived from polis, the Greek word for city or community. The idea is the polis is both the community, and it's also the means that whereby we overcome our baser nature to be able to live with each other. So police, polite, and politics all come from the same root, which same similar way to be civilized comes from cities, and also to be civil, civility. Politeness means repressing your bad impulses. So, you're not a person unless you have this sort of Freudian id, is the idea. We're not a society unless we have crime. Crime will always be there. We are sinful. We are fallen creatures. It all goes back to a tradition of philosophy that says that there is a deep evil in our nature, which is what drives us to achieve things. The economy is ultimately based on marshaling that selfish and antisocial force for good instead of evil. But in order to do that, you need to have cops to stop you from acting the same way you would in the economy in any other domain of human activity. Thus, there is a permanent war necessarily at the basis of society, and the police are the sort of embodiment of that force of civilization, which means that they can't be civilized themselves. They're the people who sort of make a sacrifice of the gains that you have. It's a little like Hobbes when he says we all give up the savagery of the state of nature by giving one guy the power, but that guy who has the power actually is still a savage. He still lives in the state of nature. And police, that's the sovereign, right? And the police are the point at which sovereignty of that kind hits the rubber. The rubber hits the road. I believe it's the actual expression there. And where that monopoly of force that supposedly makes us civilized, but is not itself civilized, actually comes into play. So that's the idea. It's a war that can never be won because it's the war that makes us. Now the question is, how do we overcome that? What would peace actually be like? How could we have a society where the social peace isn't a truce and a permanent war, but is rather actual peace? What would it mean to actually live with each other without police? And it seems like inconceivable, but in fact, police are relatively recent, Police forces such as exist today were really just created over the course of the 19th century. And originally, when they created them, they had almost nothing to do with crime. They were means of controlling workers, or the American South's escaped slaves, or newly freed African Americans, former slaves. They were there for explicitly means of social control and protecting property, breaking up strikes when the army couldn't be brought in because they might be biased in favor of the strikers, things like that. They were political originally, political police, same word.